Like the Force, Thursday night, Star Wars Newsnet Live, the return of Tom. I have someone to talk to. I'm not talking into the void this week. A wonderful, wonderful experience. That is, Tom, you're fresh out of Fantastic Four. Is that correct?
Yes, I am.
Did you enjoy it?
I did. I did.
That's good. I'll enjoy
Uh,
it, you think?
I would say I'm not going to give anything away, obviously. I think it really fun movie, very enjoyable. Production
Okay.
design was amazing. Stick around for the post credits.
Of course. Yes, of course. I'm gonna guess.
So
Yeah, we won't get into that. I have a feeling I know what to expect for the post credits. I'm excited for it. I can't say I've been. So actually, Thunderbolts. I really like Thunderbolts, but since other than Thunderbolts, I can't tell you an MCU project I actually enjoyed in a while. Like a while. I guess Loki season 2. I
mhm.
didn't. I liked Loki season 2.
What about
But no, I don't think I liked anything else really since.
Deadpool? Did you see Deadpool and Wolverine?
So, oh yeah, I did see Deadpool Wolverine. It's just not my thing.
Right.
And I am fine with people who like. I didn't like it, but I know that there's most people really like that movie, and it wasn't one of those where I thought this is a bad movie. Yeah, it's just not my thing. So that's on, that's just a matter of taste rather than I think that this one has serious flaws, because I could see why people would enjoy it if that's your kind of thing. Just not for me. I haven't seen Ironheart yet. I haven't seen that one. I've heard good things about that. I actually am interested in watching that. The shows I feel like have been okay. Some of the shows, like
Mhm.
I thought Agatha All Along was fun, but movie wise, I haven't really enjoyed. Like Captain America was terrible. Like that movie sucked. And I'm trying to think some of the others. I'm actually, believe it or not, I'm not that big Spider-Man No Way Home fan either.
Oh,
Like I
really?
just thought that was a nostalgia fest of villains that had no pertaining to Tom Holland's Spider-Man, and we're throwing him in like he didn't really have his own villain in that season other than I guess himself in some ways, I guess, for starting all this. Anyway, but this is not the MCU show, of course. This is about Star Wars, but and we can talk about that. We can talk about that later. But regardless, I'm glad you had a good time for Fantastic Four.
A lot of fun.
I am much looking forward to talking about what we're going to get into in just a few minutes, because boom, we have Ezra Bridger photos from San Diego Comic Con coming out. We got Darth Maul images coming out from San Diego Comic Con, which is fun. But it was a multiverse. Oh, wait, did I say? Yeah, no way. Yeah, I said multiverse. Not a fan of Spider-Man multiverse. I love Spider-Verse movies with Miles Morales, like, but that's different. So I love the Into the Spider-Verse movies. I can't
Oh
wait
yeah.
for the third one. But sorry, I was just responding to the there. Manslayer, it's good to see you back. I know we've been talking. I need to catch up on some of the messages you recently sent me. But it's good to see you back. I'm glad you're able to hop in. Chad, it's been a while this evening. He is here. So let's go ahead. We have those two images to talk about, and then we're gonna get into. It's been a year since the Acolyte season finale, just over a year since that show concluded. And I think it's safe to say that this was the most polarizing Star Wars show out there. And I don't think that that is using hyperbole or exaggeration. Like, I really think that that's pretty clear. The most polarizing show that we've had. And so I kind of want to get into, we're going to reflect on that show and what maybe we feel about it now, slash what is the legacy of that show moving forward? Maybe how is it going to impact future decisions made in Star Wars TV? What mistakes were made? We can get into all of the discourse a little bit about that, and because I think it's such a complex issue when you talk about the Acolyte. Sometimes it is as simple as this or that. With the Acolyte, there's just a whole bunch of other things that are permeating like under the surface too. And I think it's important maybe to give like a full range of that discussion, but we'll talk about that as well very soon. So first, though, you want to talk about Maul or you want to get into some Ahsoka season 2? I'll give you the selection, and it's the return for you today.
Yeah.
So I'll give
Thank
you the
you.
selection.
Let's talk about my buddy Maul.
All right, let's get into Maul. I really hope that like Sam Witwer comes to Orlando MegaCon next year. I'd love to talk to him about Star Wars because anyway, I don't know. He just seems like a really, really cool guy. But let's see. We got Maul here. What are you thinking the base of this show is going to be? Like, we know that this is kind of going to be about Maul's journey in the criminal underworld, after, the rise of the Empire, but what is the story for Maul going to be? Like, what is the point of Maul emerging as a fixture of a show? Because I've always thought Maul's been a great character to slide in, here or there for these little arcs. But what is the purpose of like having a Maul-centric show? Like, what's the theme going to be? What are the arcs going to look like? What do you think we need to know more of when it comes to Maul?
I feel like one thing, and I'm sure a lot of people would agree, is to connect the dots with where we see him, I guess, during the Clone Wars. And then when we get to Solo, when he shows up in that movie as a surprise appearance, how is he pulling the strings, I guess, behind the scenes? I really want to see how he gets involved with I guess just the crime syndicates and how he works through that and survives, I guess, in that underworld. I really want to see that. I want to see more of, I guess, some of the characters from Solo, like Hera, and see how he gets involved with what is it, Crimson Dawn? Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to see, I guess, to connect the dots with Solo and then beyond how he gets into where he is in Rebels. So I just want to see all that backstory. I'm anxious to see.
So the backstory part is interesting because there's all of that. There's so much that happens between when we see him again in Rebels. There's the rise of Crimson Dawn, and then we have the fall of Crimson Dawn. And I want to see some of that rise, of course, because we get a little look at Dryden Voss in the Clone Wars season 7, and we kind of see that Maul's been, planting these seeds. He's been doing all of these things, but at the same time, Maul he's a villain, he's a bad guy, but his interests aren't aligned with that of the Empire necessarily. Like he's not exactly gung ho. I mean, he was someone that was terrified of the Empire in general and was, trying to recruit Ahsoka to help him, kill Palpatine and take this whole thing down rather than see, it rise. So I'm curious to see if that's still like a motive of his, is to undermine the Empire and do something like that. I'm really curious to see what this new apprentice kind of looks like when we've seen, if we've seen the images from the leak trailer from Star Wars Celebration. Does he have, apparently he has this apprentice. They're maybe adapting some of the stories that George Lucas had created for Maul in the future and are tweaking and doing some different things. But obviously we know that typically when Maul takes someone under his wing, it doesn't end well for that person. So I'm curious if we're going to see not the death of Maul, because of course we know how his story ends in Rebels, but if this show is going to build up to where in Rebels we see he's like a shadow of what he used to be. He's trying to cling to something he doesn't really have anymore, and he's really trying to, what's the word I'm looking for? He's really trying to regain that power and prestige and influence. And I'm wondering if we're going to see a complete fall to where we get in Rebels and it kind of bridges that gap start to finish. And if this apprentice is going to be someone that betrays him, is this apprentice going to be someone that also falls and that assists with that? I'm curious to see how all of those things align, because he is a very complex character.
Yeah, you figure for someone who was basically a one-note assassin in the Phantom Menace, and how bringing him back, which I believe was Lucas's idea, to bring him back, and how complex they made his character. And I don't think we've seen a character like Maul as far as being kind of, correct me if I'm wrong, Force sensitive, coming from the dark side. I mean, with the exception of Visage Ventress, but he's just the rage has never left him. Like he is just,
right.
he wants the revenge on everyone.
That's
And
so
it's just
true.
so cool to have a character like that at the center of the show, because
Mm.
there's really no, I guess, no holds barred for him,
Mhm.
what he can do. And I feel like the apprentice is like a wild card in the story. So it's very interesting
Mhm.
how they'll play off each other and how that will lead his story
Mhm.
into, I guess, the territory when we pick it up again in
Mhm.
Rebels.
So let's get into a couple of the comments here about the show. And this one, he's a Warwolf here from Twitter says that it's going to make him an anti-hero. It's going to be a redemptive story that humanizes him because he's not really a villain. I get where people might come from and saying like Maul, like you can humanize him, and he's like saying not everyone, he's fueled by revenge, just those who betrayed him, like the Emperor. But to say that Maul isn't a villain, I think is a mischaracterization. I think that he is complex, but you can have a villain that's complex. Like Thrawn is complex, but Thrawn is definitely a villain as well. Because if like Maul, the definition of a villain, like he seeks to kill, Obi-Wan. Even they have this weird relationship, but even in Rebels, he's trying to kill Obi-Wan. He tries to kill everyone on the Ghost crew in
Mhm.
order to recruit Ezra and tries to kill them all off. Like he has motives that aren't necessarily quote unquote like as evil maybe as say the Emperor, or he's not as ruthless as say a as a Darth Vader, but he's definitely a villain. And Maul's intentions, I would say, to say that they are good would also maybe be a mischaracterization. I could see the argument, but like when I think of good intentions, like what is he going to do for the betterment of the galaxy? It's always what's maybe going to better myself and my position within this galaxy. I'll do whatever I need to do in order to make that happen. But he's a complex character that creates this dynamic that is worth discussing. And the reason I brought Thrawn up was because a lot of people will point to those early Thrawn novels where he's rising up in the Chiss ascendancy, like early Thrawn novels from Timothy Zahn, as in like post Disney acquisition, not necessarily heir to the Empire Thrawn. Like I'm talking about like maybe the Thrawn like ascendancy books where they talk about his backstory when he's younger, and he leaves the ascendancy, he's exiled in order to try to gain allies to help against an incoming threat to the Chiss ascendancy, and he's trying to do all these things versus, and then he just ends up helping expand the empire. Like Maul's intentions aren't that different. It's just he's more self-motivated. He's not trying to do anything for the betterment of the galaxy. But what are your takes on Maul being, because I do think we do humanize Maul a lot, and they do make a point of that in animation. But how much of that do you think is going to play a role in this? Because you still have to stay true to kind of how he ends up in the end.
Well, I feel like any character humanized, whether a good character with good intentions or an evil character or someone with that's kind of in the middle, humanizing is important because it makes for an interesting character. But
Mm,
Maul, like I said, is just in it for himself. I guess the
right.
most human and noble we see him is at the very end of his story, where and still even in that moment, he's looking for revenge. He wants
Mm,
the chosen one to avenge him, basically. I think one of the best ways to characterize Maul is, I forget which season of the Clone Wars, but there was a uh, one of the trailers, and I forget which season it was. I should have looked this up before,
mm,
but where he says all his intentions, he states he's going to go. We're going to go after Kenobi. We're going to go after
mm.
Dooku. He
He's
is
all about it.
just set. Yeah, he's just set on. Um, it's like wiping everything out and just being the last man
Mm.
standing. So, but yeah, I mean, like I said, you can take when a character's complex and he has many facets, he is humanized, but Maul has no intention of the greater good or of
I, but I'm excited to see what they do with him that we haven't seen before, because I feel like we've gotten a very fleshed out Maul and all the different aspects of him. So maybe having a brand new apprentice will bring out this other side of him we haven't seen. Because we
yeah,
kind of see him at his best and his worst, and he does have one of the more tragic stories when you think about it in all of Star Wars, given
right.
how he was manipulated from essentially start to finish. A couple more comments, and then we'll get into Ahsoka season 2 here. Let's see. Manslayer thinks it'll be about legacy and, of course, having a Maul versus Vader duel. He says he's always said that he seems to know Vader and Malachor Rebels, waiting for that duel. Since then, it would be fun to get a Vader versus Maul duel. And the way the animation works, I mean, they could do some incredible stuff with a duel like that. But I'll be honest, part of me would love to see Vader just like Maul not even have a chance against Vader and just wipe the floor with him. Similarly, like I would say, I feel like Maul is much more powerful than like a Reva we see in Clone War in the Obi-Wan Kenobi show. But you know how Vader didn't even really ignite a lightsaber for most of that fight. I would love to see Vader do something similar to Maul almost to establish his dominance, and then maybe just draw his blade just to have some fun for a little bit. What about you?
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm all there. Obviously, that would be a real fan's dream to see that kind of duel. I think that Maul would be totally overmatched, of course, in that case. But as Manslayer was saying, he does know him, and he knows that he can't match his power. So he does say that to, I believe he says that to Ezra and the Rebels crew, or maybe it's just Ezra when he's trying to manipulate him. So
Manslayer says, I think General Grievous is threatening you from your ceiling. So I had to put the ceiling fan on blast. And in my apartment, my apartment's so small. Like wherever I were to set up, you would see it. But like last week, I did the solo, and I was tired of the ceiling fan going in like some of the videos. So I said I'll turn it off. And the way the apartment's set up, I turned it off. You can kind of see it if you watch the video. Like I perspire a little bit, but when I tell you, I was drenched in sweat last week after the show because it gets so hot in here without the fan. And so I have to have it on or I will die. Like you will watch me on live stream. I will pass out from like a heat stroke here in this room if I do not have this fan going. And granted, that might lead to a larger audience if we just put a video there. It's like, man collapses after talking about Darth Maul on live stream. But I'm going to try to avoid that.
Before we proceed, Manslayer actually had another great comment that I didn't even think of, that the hate Vader after Maul killed Qui-Gon. That's really interesting to me to think about that, because think about it. Qui-Gon was the only one that believed in Anakin.
Right.
It wasn't Obi-Wan at first. It wasn't Yoda or the Council. And Maul took down Qui-Gon. So I think that would be very interesting to see if anything like that is like, kind of in play with if they do meet in the show. I don't want to get my hopes up, but I think that would be a very powerful thing for Anakin to reconcile, or Vader. So
it could be a fascinating plot line to follow, but I don't want it to turn into the Vader show. And that's the danger you get into with anytime Vader enters into something, is he's going to monopolize the spotlight to some degree because he's the most iconic villain ever. And so I very sparsely want to see Vader in this. It's more kind of like that, like even Rogue One, we talk about like how often is Vader mentioned in Rogue One talks? I feel like it's a lot, because even though he's not in it very long, it's just his presence and some of his scenes, of course, it can monopolize the conversation. Yep. Which is fun sometimes. It's fun. So we got this picture of Iman Esfandi from the set of Ahsoka season 2. You could see the little Ezra Bridger scars, clean shaving, got the little jacket going on. I don't know if you saw that video he posted of him, whipping out the lightsaber and doing some lightsaber moves out on the balcony. Seems like he is all in, ready to go for season 2. And when I tell you, this casting is just nailed. Like, he just embodies Ezra Bridger. He embraces it fully online with fans at conventions. This was one of the castings where the moment that I saw him on my screen and he started talking, I felt like this was Ezra Bridger. Like, I did not have to. Sometimes when you have those jumps from animation to live action, it can be a little bit bumpy at first and a little uncomfortable. I didn't feel that way with Iman. I thought he was just, flawlessly, effortlessly thrust in, no problems. And I cannot wait to get more Ezra in season 2.
Oh, I totally agree. I think he looks great. I mean, they had, I think, in one clip, they had that picture next to a picture of Ezra from the animated series. And yeah, I mean, perfect casting. I thought he did a great job in the show in Ahsoka when he was in it. I had some issues with the show, but they weren't related to
Right.
his performance or
Oh,
portrayal
that's
of
interesting.
Ezra.
What was
And
your main issue with the show? 'Cause I don't think
I
we've talked much about
yeah,
Ahsoka.
I don't want to. It might come off to some people as nitpicky, but
It's fine. What is it?
I felt like the pacing was a little strange. You know, he's there for so many, you know, so how in the timeline is it? It's almost a decade, right? It's like probably 8 or 9 years that he hasn't seen the Rebels crew, that he's been in
Mhm.
exile, I guess. It's like in all that time, you know, just silly things like that. They might be nitpicky, like, you know, Thrawn
Mhm.
never found him, and then Sabine goes and finds him, and stuff like that. But even I think the thing that bothered me the most, and people are gonna laugh when they hear this, but when Sabine and Ezra meet again, and they were very close, obviously, in Rebels. I feel like it's like she didn't see him in a week, you know,
Right.
not almost a decade. And I felt like that could have been a little bit stronger. I feel like, you know, he doesn't seem to, and again, it's not so much them as performers. I think it
Right.
was more the writing.
The writing.
um, I felt like, you know,
That makes sense.
it's just it was hard to buy that they were, you know, that he didn't even know the Empire was defeated, and then he
Mhm.
was like, oh, so they
So
lost, basically.
So I get that. I'm gonna push back a little bit on the initial meeting when they met and how nonchalant he was. I don't know. To me, I had no problem with that because it felt like he was just being that same Ezra Bridger we saw before, and
That's
maybe it
fair.
would have been. But and I think that if we had gotten too far, because anyone that's isolated like that for so long probably isn't gonna react so nonchalantly to see their friend. But this is also Star Wars, and I can kind of wrap my head around the fact that okay, we're just gonna play the shtick of the character for a little bit. But I agree that maybe at the end it's like, hey Hera, like, you know, like come on, like he just
Yeah,
got
and
home and
little things
everything.
like that, like why would he keep the stormtrooper mask on? I think someone
Mhm.
did a re-edit of that with him holding it coming down,
Right.
because like it's like
It's just
you're landing on a
like, yeah,
rebel
come
or
on.
a republic ship. It's like you're dressed up like a stormtrooper. You don't even take your mask off.
Right.
I mean, I know it was cinematic to like a reveal, but little
Mhm.
things like that. But overall, like I probably like
Uh-huh.
the show more than a lot of people. There were just little
Mhm.
things like that, and I think we'll
So
talk more
those
about that.
things, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, for sure. But those things didn't bother me as much. And then this isn't, we're not going to talk too much about Ahsoka season two or Ahsoka season one, of course. But
right.
the thing that for me it was the line from Lord of the Rings when Bilbo was saying that he feels like, you know, stretched thin like butter scraped over too much bread, right? Not enough butter scraped over too much bread. That's to me what the season felt like. It felt like
Mhm.
they didn't have enough to draw out what they did. And it felt almost like they tried to compress some things together that didn't need to be. And then they
Mhm.
stretched out some storylines way too far that didn't
Yeah,
need to. Like trying to, for instance, like trying to force Thrawn into this as much as they didn't need to happen. And then they stretched out like some of the tension between characters way too far and then didn't settle it. For instance, the Sabine and Ahsoka have this massive the tension that they have with each other in season one, where you know where Sabine is frustrated with Ahsoka and feels like Ahsoka abandoned her. And then you have Ahsoka who's frustrated with Sabine and nervous about what's going to happen there, and then nervous about herself as a teacher. They have this big angst against one another, and we don't ever have the two characters we've been hearing about their problems all season. Those
mhm.
weren't the two characters that resolved the issue. It was Hu Yang doing some sort of brief exposition dump to Ezra, who's just getting filled in on everything in the
Yeah,
ship, and then we go to them and they've worked out all their problems. And it was little things like that, or Ahsoka telling Sabine that using a lightsaber does not make you a Jedi. Using the Force does not make you with the lightsaber does not make you a Jedi. Things like that. And then the first time she uses the Force, is to force grab a lightsaber to kill like one of the zombie, fighters that's coming against her. And I'm like, that kind of felt like it just undermined the lesson that Ahsoka was trying to teach. I always felt really strongly that the first time she used the Force should have been when she was trying to push Ezra onto the ship for the first time. And that would have been like the real level of trust between the two characters. And to me, that was my problem with the show, was just very specific story centric decisions that they made that I felt like didn't thematically line up with what they were trying to do, but also kind of didn't pay off with some of the characters. And that to me amplifies some of the nitpicks that you mentioned. It amplifies those a little bit more because it just adds a little bit more fuel to the fire. With that being said, I firmly believe that they might learn from these mistakes from season 1 and can make season 2 even better, because for the most part, I enjoyed the first half of Ahsoka season 1 quite a bit. So I hope that we can add on to that. Yeah. These dynamics can feel a little bit more natural. The crew's the cast is going to be there together a little more. Chemistry is going to improve. And with hope, this is going to be a great season. It sounds like they're trying to absolutely do quite a bit with the show for season 2. A lot of major battles. We have Akbar coming back.
Oh, can't wait. And there's a lot I love about the show or season 1, and I'm looking forward to season 2. I really want to see it, and all these shows, honestly. Yeah. And I don't want to be like, why can't everything be Andor? But when you watch it, because I watched it again, I was on vacation. I was in flight. I had some episodes downloaded. There's nothing in that show that's not needed. Like every scene is like necessary. And I know, look, they had, obviously the budget shows that they had an all-star team assembled for that. And I know that, Filoni's new to directing live action. I know things, a lot of the shows that he's done have still some of that animation feel. And I'm not taking that away. I do enjoy that a lot. It's just that I feel like there's so many good things. I just feel, and we'll talk about Acolyte a little bit, but like, I feel like sometimes they shoot themselves in the foot when they have something good. So again, for me, overall, I enjoyed the show quite a bit. So I don't want to be that guy bashing everything and be very nitpicky, but like there's certain things, of course, sometimes they just get to you.
Of course. No, I 100% agree. So, all right. Speaking of little things and big things that get to you sometimes, let's talk about the Acolytes. All right, I'm going to go through rapid fire. Just so we have Chimere, we have Osha and May, Master Soul. I got Jordan Jecki up here. I got Vernestra Rowe, unfortunately, on the screen. I have Darth Plagueis, the Royal Highness himself, that I cannot wait to see again. Fingers crossed someday. We have Kelnaka and Dara Torben with Master Soul in the flashback. Mother Anasea, of course. There is a lot to unpack here when it comes to the Acolyte. We are just over a year from when the series concluded. Now, Tom, overall, the Acolyte, I felt like, had some very high highs in terms of some of the action and choreography amongst the lightsaber duels, and some extremely low lows in the show. Now, the discourse on the Acolyte is another thing entirely. I felt like The Last Jedi on steroids for the most part, in terms of just some of it being so obnoxious, hate-centered, and incredibly toxic, trying to destroy this show before it even got started. I mean, there was all those fan bombings before the show even aired. And then I'll say this too, I think that there is a level of fandom as well that can be like a toxic positivity almost, where this is like, how dare you insult my thing? This is my favorite thing, and there's nothing wrong with this at all. So what I want to do here is take like a very nuanced approach to the Acolyte and really kind of dive into what works, what doesn't work, and why this show maybe did get canceled and there aren't any, further seasons. Because I know that we both have things we like about this show, things that we're frustrated with as well. But I just want to like make it clear to everyone as well that this is just about the show that we're going to be talking about. Like, to the stuff that you see online, the like personal attacks, the racism, the bigotry, and the misogyny, which unfortunately is steeped in the Star Wars fan base at this point,
Yeah.
is disgusting, and we absolutely abhor all of that. If I say I don't like something in the Acolyte, it's just from a show perspective, okay? So, Tom, about the Acolyte, go ahead and tell me like something you really enjoyed about it, and then maybe your biggest, gripe with the show.
Okay.
Just
One thing
begin as we reflect on it.
I want to say one thing first. I know there are a lot of people that hate the show. I know there are a lot of people that love the show. So I will be as respectful as possible. There were a lot of things I did love about the show, and there were things I didn't love about the show. But if you want to break your brain, it's been a while since I've seen it through. So I says, you know what? Before this discussion tonight, let me see if I can find a recap online. And I found a 3-minute recap, and there is a lot that happens in the show, but it's and it might be because of my, I wanted to find the shortest video to just recap it. I was a little bit tied up today with stuff from work. So much happens in the show, and I think that it seems pretty convoluted as far as they go in a lot of different directions. There's a lot of story. Obviously, it was what, 8 episodes, 6 episodes, I can't remember.
It was 8 episodes, and it was choppy, uneven.
I think let me backtrack. You said something I really loved about the show. Manny Jacinto.
Let's try to start positive.
Yeah, Manny Jacinto. That am I saying his name right?
No,
he was
Darth
phenomenal.
Arms?
He was phenomenal in the show. His performance was great. I love the episode, and I know not much happened, but when he was alone with Osha on that planet, and he was talking about the Sith, and he's just the way he's trying to manipulate her. And one of my favorite lines in the show is probably, to some people, would be considered a throwaway line, where she says something like that sounds, she basically said something to him that sounds like the dark side or something like that, and he was like, "It's just semantics," and I just love that line so much, because he totally embodied what that whole thing is. He goes, there's really no, that's how, he would try to seduce someone. There's really no difference. And I think Palpatine did it to Anakin. There's really not much of a difference between the Jedi and the Sith, So anyway, he was phenomenal. His fighting style, his performance, he played it so well. And people may complain that it was obvious that he was.
It was, and that has nothing to do with Manny Jacinto. That has everything to do with just the writing and the direction of the story. And how it was mismarketed from the very beginning.
Well, I don't think it really hurts the story too much that even it was that obvious. I think he was phenomenal. And again, talking about the highlights of the show, the duels, I felt the finale was actually really good. I hope I'm not taking all your answers, but of course, seeing Darth Plagueis was amazing. The way they did it, the way he was realized the first time in, I don't think he was in any, I was going to say in live action, but I don't think that we've ever seen him anywhere. So I mean, great stuff. So those are the positives, and I felt.
So let me go ahead and jump in real quick on the Manny Jacinto and the mystery. So here's my problem, and why I actually think it really hurts the show, because when you have like the trailer, you see this like dark side. We presume to be a Sith character with the red lightsabers. In the trailer, we're like, oh my gosh, who is this? And then they have this whole like murder mystery of who's behind all of these things. But it felt like very quickly on in the story, we were aware of who all the moving parts were. And then once they finally revealed it to us, which it wasn't until episode 5, I believe, because 4 is when he makes his dramatic appearance, and then they cut it. And then we have to wait a week for episode 5. That should have been one episode cut together, nice and neat, sandwiched in, and you get all of it at once. I thought that hurt the show. And you waited another week for a reveal we all knew was coming. And then the issue is once you get 5 episodes in now, because they have these compressed seasons of 8 episodes, you only have 3 episodes left to tell the story. And then they did a whole flashback episode right before the season finale. And so you've cut yourself off from being able to tell the parts of the story that's interesting. Because at this point, I don't when I got to episode 7, I knew we were going for a flashback, and I couldn't care less at this point.
Yeah.
Like, I want to stay in the present with Manny Jacinto's character, but I only just got to know him and who he is an episode ago. Now I got to go back to see exactly what I already knew happened, because nothing they showed in those flashbacks really changed anything for any character outside of, Osha, who found this out, but could have found that out anyway. Like I was telling you before the show, what they absolutely should have done, I think in hindsight they would agree, is have the flashbacks, quote unquote, just be the first episode of the show. You just set the entire stage, you know what has happened, and then you go from there with May trying to kill those people. We have those relationships already built with some of those characters, and we know why they're dying. And then that way, when you build up to the stranger appearing and Chimera unmasking himself, you have the rest of the show to work with, and you don't have this constant, tug and pull back and forth over, which storyline matters most. And I think, not that the show would have been perfect if you do that, but some of the just really weird decisions made and the pacing of the story, I think, instantly gets solved. I'm not saying it makes it a 10 out of 10, but it may up it a little bit for a lot of people, because I think everyone just felt it was so disjointed so much at the time.
Yeah, and it's funny too, because like when I was watching it, especially the first couple episodes, I'm like, why are people hating on this so much? Like, in that third episode, I think that lost a lot of people. I thought it was a great episode when they introduced the witches. I thought that was really well done. I mean, I know people meme and they joke about the power of one, the power of two, the power of many. But I thought it worked there. I thought that was a good episode. And, it was great to see I'm all for seeing Force users that aren't Jedi or Sith, because it opens up so much more to the different facets of the Force. So I thought that was actually pretty cool. But like, I totally agree with you on that, because by the time we got to the flashback episode that was supposed to, I guess, feel like it revealed everything, it was late in the show. It didn't really give us it not so much that it didn't give us much, but it didn't really explain some of the motivations. Like, why did Torben just drink that poison? Like, he just takes it from her.
It doesn't. And if the questions it does answer don't do enough justice for taking you away from the critical character components you've established of, Osha and Chimera and what's going to happen there. Master Soul and May, what's going to happen there. It takes away from all of the components of the show that you're really interested in. And as far as Mother Anastasia and I forget what they call themselves, like the Coven or something like that, but the witches, I didn't have a problem with the witches. I am with you. I think that it's really cool when you get into these different Force sects. I wish maybe we would have learned a little bit more about them. Again, maybe if that's all at the beginning, we feel a little bit more attached, and then boom, they're killed at the beginning. 16 years ago they started, versus we know that this is going to happen the entire season. We know kind of exactly where this is going, and the payoff isn't strong enough because to really justify it. And to be reflective for a moment, a lot of what the problem was for a lot of people was they felt that the introduction of the witches creating the twins was somehow a disservice to Anakin as the chosen one, so to speak. And I remember I made a whole video at that time basically saying how that's completely not a disservice to Anakin, because Anakin was created by the Force itself. Like, he was a manifestation, of the Force to bring balance, so to speak. While the witches created the twins, like they were the ones that used their magic to try to create life. And I thought that was a fascinating thing that we could have discovered more of. And frankly, to me, I have no problem differentiating between Anakin and what happened with these witches and what they did. And it honestly provides further exploration of, like, was it the dark side completely that they were using? Like, what were the methods involved? We could have explored that more. Instead, people were were absolutely up in arms about this. And I do get the whole at the very end of the episode when they had like the pop song kind of thing playing. Like I get
Yeah.
also some people had issues with that. That stuff doesn't bother me as much, but
Yeah.
for Star Wars, I totally get people not wanting that to feel that kind of entering into a Star Wars space though.
Yeah, I think yeah, it was a little jarring, but again, so what? Like, I don't care.
Right.
And I think when Amanda Steinberg, that's her name, Stenberg, when she actually got online and was calling out some people, I think that it didn't really help her cause too much. So I think it kind of fueled some of the hatred a little bit. Now she had every
Right.
right to. I feel like they were being really brutal, some of the fandom. But I don't even want to talk about that because I feel like that's
Right.
there. It's kind of like a small, hopefully a small minority of fandom. I want to really talk
Mhm.
about the show and where the show shined
Right.
and where didn't as much. So I won't really get into that. But yeah, stuff like that doesn't really bother me. What was I going to say? The sad part I think about it is that they introduced, first of all, the production design was amazing. I love how they had that retro, it felt like 100 years before the Phantom Menace. That looked
Mhm.
really good, but they also introduced a lot of interesting aspects that I would love to see more of. Like I want to find
Right.
out what Venestra talked to Yoda about, and I want to see obviously more of.
We'll never know who that little green guy is. Like, we'll just never know. It's gonna be
Well,
a mystery. That was my
I'm
favorite meme
confident.
that came out of everything. Was like, what do you mean you're canceling the Acolyte? We're never gonna know who that mysterious green person was. It's Yaddle, actually. Well, actually,
Yeah,
that'd be fun. That'd be
probably.
the funny part.
But like I feel like we'll see we haven't seen the last of Plagueis. I can bet my life on that, and we'll probably see more of Venestra and
I don't
those
want to see any
characters.
more of Benestra.
I know you weren't really too happy because you're a really, I know you're really a diehard High Republic fan. I haven't delved as much into the books as you have, so I know you weren't
Is
really too happy with her portrayal.
as big as a fan as I am of Vernestra, I was that upset at the way she's portrayed in The Acolyte because, and maybe in some of these books that are coming out where plays a role in them, maybe they'll answer some of those like questions that I have. But to me, it stems from the performance, and I don't want to sit here and hate on different people's performances as an actor. But to me, it was the worst portrayal. It was like it's probably my least favorite acting performance in any Star Wars show we've ever had, and I may even extend to movies. Like it was to me that bad, and I'm sorry if that's like a personal. It was just to me, it was just horrible, and it was just completely stoic, devoid of life, and that's like not who Venestra is at all. She's very composed and this very serious character, but there's a lot going on. I know this is like a much older version of her,
Yeah,
but it just felt so stone cold. Like to me, Vernestra felt like one of the Jedi we might see in the prequels that is so dogmatic and rule of law. This is the way we do things, and that's not the character that I've been led to believe exists. And some of that was just kind of gross. And so I just didn't appreciate the portrayal, especially as a big High Republic fan. So that was a major disappointment too. And it felt like there was a whole relationship with her and Chimera that never got explored. And the show
yeah,
waited until the final episode to kind of realize what it could have been the entire time, which is this
yeah,
action packed, start to finish, and incredible fighting back and forth. We're using the force in unique ways. There's betrayal, there's intrigue, there's romance, all of this happening, very fast-paced story versus the mystery that wasn't a mystery that we were kind of given for a while. I wish we had explored that because the Plagueis part of things and Chimera and Osha's relationship and how that relates to Master Soul was far and away the most interesting part of the show for me, and that all happens at the very end when it felt like it finally figured out maybe what it should have been the entire time. And that to me is like just kind of the travesty of the Acolyte. Was it kind of figured out maybe what it needed to be, but it was a little too late perhaps.
yeah. We're getting a lot of comments. I think people are really excited to talk about this show. Yeah, I Red Six down is it has a couple of comments too. Yeah, I mean, Master Soul was great. I just think for me, I felt like Cremier was the standout for me, but Master Soul was great too. I loved him every time he was on screen, and the duels were amazing. And one thing I do want to say is that, for sometimes a franchise that gets talked about as kind of going down well-trodden paths, they did take some good swings with this show.
They take a lot of swings.
They did. I mean, some of them would maybe misses, but what is it? 30% in baseball, you're successful. But no, they took some big swings. I think that some of it was great. I think the word, and I think I said this before, very uneven, unfortunately for me. Some things just didn't add up. I mean, it's tough because we want Star Wars. We always want every show to succeed, right? When we watch it. And I just felt like it was very uneven. I felt like you said, pacing was strange. Mystery wasn't really a mystery. We kind of, I guess it was maybe poorly told in a way that it just didn't have the same punch that it should have. But there were great moments. Great moments. And I don't know. I mean, we're a year out.
I'm a High Republic nerd, right? So this was given to us as a quote unquote High Republic story, right? And so this is taking place like 50 years or whatever before, episode 1, or it was like 50 years or 100 years before episode 1. I think it was like 100 years before episode 1 is when this takes place. I don't remember exact timeline, but it takes place several decades before episode 1. And to me, the problem with that we run into is it didn't feel like enough of a different era for me. Like outside of just kind of putting some different colored robes on some of the Jedi and having a few references here or there, it felt like the Jedi were running very similarly to what we see in the prequels. Like Vernestra felt like a prequel Jedi that was just like getting involved in politics and hiding things from other Jedi, hiding things from the Order, and the Jedi weren't being proactive in solving problems. The Jedi were being reactive to things. And the beginning of the High Republic, it's like, oh, the Jedi are at their peak. The Jedi are accomplishing these great feats that we haven't seen. The Jedi have the complete trust of the galaxy. And to say that this is the very end of the High Republic, so that trust should kind of be eroding, but we don't really get to see the Jedi in any of their High Republic glory. There's nothing to tell me this is a High Republic story. And that's why I think a lot of people were even a little bit confused as to the timeline, what's going on, and why is this feel just like that. So that was another problem for me, is if we're going to jump into different eras of Star Wars, you need to really make it feel like that. And I think it's way easier to do something like The Mandalorian, which is set so close to after the original trilogy, and it's sandwiched in between two trilogies, versus The Acolyte, which takes place before we are aware of anything. But with that being said, when you watch The Mandalorian, this was the first show that was set, or the first thing we have on visual medium that's set between, the sequels and the originals. And it does feel like that era. Like it feels like its own era of a post-Empire, pre-First Order. You kind of feel what this New Republic vibe is all about. I didn't really feel like the Acolyte, with its High Republic supposed background, felt like something different than Episode 1 kind of feels, so to speak.
That's fair, especially with your background with the novels. I have, like I said, I haven't delved into them as much as you have. So for me, it didn't feel 100 years maybe before the Phantom Menace, but maybe like 20 years before or something like that. It was just that much different. But on your point about the Jedi, yeah, they I guess, again, I need to catch up on the books to really get the tone of it. But they did feel like it felt like a prequel show.
And my favorite performance of the series is Master Saul, which is Lee Jung-jae as Master Saul. I thought was fantastic. Just to kind of hit some positive things about the show, because there are components of the show that work. We talked about the action, the lightsaber duels are fantastic. And I think most people would agree that the lightsaber duels are really good. I think that's something that people, close to universally agree on with this show. And Lee Jung-jae learned English for this role. And it breaks my heart that he received some of the negativity that he did, because if you were to point, like, let's say you could only point to one bright spot of the show, he's probably the bright spot because of how much emotion that he brought to the character, how much care that he brought to it. To me, he felt like this mix of like a Qui-Gon Obi-Wan like mix almost, where he really cares, he really loves. He also, tries to keep himself at arm's length sometimes, but he can't help it. Like Qui-Gon oversteps at times. Obi-Wan maybe is more of the rule following Jedi, and he's kind of a blend of those two. And then we get to see what happens when he completely breaks inside because of what happened in his past, and how he essentially feels so responsible for what's happened to both of the twins ever since. I thought that story was really well done. Lee Jong-jae deserves his flowers for his performance as Master Soul. And it's a really tragic story that he's able to deliver quite well with his performance.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine what that's like to learn the language just to portray this character. And he there was a lot of heart in his performance. You really felt that come through.
Right. Which death, so like a lot of people die in this show, which one hits you the hardest? Was it Master Soul at the end when Osha kills him? Was it Yord getting his neck snapped? Was it
that was brutal.
Jackie getting the 3-hole punch? I personally would probably go Jackie number 1, just because you get to see his Master Soul's reaction to Jackie dying, and that line that Manny Jacinto, says there, which was, he's like, she was just a child. And he's like, you brought her here. That was just cold. Like, it was cold. It was sinister. It made you think, you're like, yeah, why are the Jedi bringing children into these possible battlefields? And makes you think about all of those things. And that death was so, I don't know about you, but it was so jarring because I didn't expect just everyone to die so quickly like that.
It was jarring. The way that Yord went out, that was really brutal. That was, it's interesting. I don't think we've had a show like this where they just were dispatched like without impunity. But I think those were those two were the most shocking deaths, but Soul, I think, was the saddest.
Yeah.
For me. So
sure. I can see that. It was just brutal. What did you think about, so Plagueis brings brought at the end? Do you think they should have brought him in sooner into the show to try to maybe sell some audiences on things they might have been vaguely familiar with from like episode 3 and the Plagueis connection to everything that comes after? Or do you think that, leaving him for the very end as this fun little teaser was fine, because he maybe would have stolen the show away from like Manny Jacinto and some of the other villains that we see in the show?
Yeah, I think it was perfect how he was used. Obviously, I want to find out more and see more of him and what he was doing at that time, and scheming and, in the background. But I think it was perfect how they used him. You don't want to. It's almost like a seasoning. You don't want to add too much, with a character like that. I think we'll have time to kind of learn more about him and see him more. But I don't want him to be overused.
I'm gonna tell you what, I was a little child again because I was, oh my gosh, I was 8, 7, I was 8, just turned 8 when Revenge of the Sith came out, and I've been obsessed with like the Plagueis novels, one of my favorite stories in Star Wars, and so when I saw his Royal Highness, his wonderful majesty on his screen for the first time, I stood up on my couch, like I stood up. And I was like the standing Leo DiCaprio meme, like, oh my gosh, like there he is, right? So I really hope we get more stories with Plagueis and they dive into that a little bit more, because I just think there's so much great and interesting Sith lore out there to explore if done properly. Like the stories there are endless, what you could do. And I would love to see them do that, especially with Plagueis. And I almost want them to just stay away from a young Palpatine even. Like if you were to do more with Plagueis, the final thing I want to see with Plagueis would be like an introduction of him meeting like a Palpatine for the first time, and that's it. I don't want to see the training. I don't want to see any of that. I want to see like the lead up to that. Does that make sense? I kind of want to stay away from anything but the two of them together.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because like it's like, what do I want and what should I have? Like I said, you don't want to get too much,
Right.
because it dilutes it a little bit. So you want
Well,
to.
for me, we've talked about recasting of the original big three. Harrison Ford, Han Solo's already been recasted for the Solo movie, and we've talked about how we'd be okay with recasting of like a Luke Skywalker for a project. I'll tell you this right here. My like hill that I'm gonna die on is I never want anyone else to play Emperor Palpatine in live action other than Ian McDiarmid. Like, I don't want anyone else to be the Emperor. Like, to me, he just is and always will be. And I just don't want to see anyone else do it. Even if it's like a younger person, I know that obviously we can go way back in time before we ever saw Ian McDiarmid in Star Wars, like way younger. I don't want it. I'm good. Like, that's one, like, I just want to imagine what young Ian McDiarmid Palpatine would have been like. And I'll let my imagination take care of the rest. So, the show was canceled. We're not going to have a season 2. There's been a lot of talk about that and how there were a lot of plans for future seasons of this show. I think that in the grand scheme of the Acolyte, the backlash and the fan response, some of the fan response played a role in their decisions to try to rip the Band-Aid off and you know what, this didn't work. I also think that if more people had just watched the show, it would have been fine. And I don't think that this is about. There is an element of like nonsensical culture war at play here, right? There is. Like to say there isn't is, I think, dismissive and untrue. However, I think this is a larger narrative outside of The Mandalorian. For large parts, Star Wars Disney Plus streaming isn't really important. Like you're not gonna see it charts most often, like on these shows. Like for Nielsen, you don't see a lot of Star Wars popping up. It's not really a cultural necessity, and it's not really discussed like some of these other shows are. And part of that though is just TV in general. It just comes and goes so quickly, and there's so much out there that your main base of Star Wars fans that are going to go watch a Star Wars movie that comes out, they're not going to necessarily sit and watch a more niche Star Wars show set without something that with any familiarity. And The Mandalorian is different because it was able to be a global phenomenon in large part because of our favorite little green guy that exists in that show. And I think this just speaks to a larger perspective that Star Wars streaming just isn't really relative as a whole. And I'm not saying that that's always going to be the case. I think that Andor and its Emmy push, and we'll see what happens with that, could like change some things and add some more prestige to Disney Plus. But as a whole, I don't know if Star Wars streaming is overly relative to the conversation to justify spending that much money on a show that was less watched than Andor. And they spent just the same amount of money on The Acolyte as they did for Andor, but they're not going to get the critical acclaim that they're getting for The Acolyte like they will against Andor. So it really doesn't add much monetary value to the company. And if that's what's going to happen, then, if it got all this backlash, but a ton of people were watching it, and it was one of the more watched shows out there, like it was charting really high and it was getting Ahsoka numbers. Like, and Ahsoka wasn't even some like streaming's wonder. Like Ahsoka did fine, I think, for what they were wanting, obviously, because they're making a second season. Like if it charted like Ahsoka numbers or, obviously even above Ahsoka numbers with some of the, culture war stuff going on online and some of the hate that existed, they still would have gone forward with the season 2 if it's making them money, if it's profitable. I think it just comes down to the show was not great. There was a lot of flaws in the show. It wasn't the best product they could have put forward, and not many people watched it, and not a lot of people are watching Star Wars TV when it's all said and done.
You know, one thing that's interesting too, it's up till 6 years ago, Star Wars was not a TV franchise. It was a movie franchise.
Exactly.
And I think that people, you know, it's except for us freaks that were on this, but
Right.
we'll watch anything they put out because we love it. You know, we're fans. But I think for the casual person, they're not going to, especially, I think a lot of the bad, how can I say? You had a lot of things going against the Acolyte, but I think the viewership was definitely the number one reason why it was not renewed for a second season. But also, you know, just, you know, you could say whatever you want. You could say people, toxic fan base, things like that going on, you know, in the background. But I think the viewership definitely was the number one reason. And it wasn't,
they probably did want to remove
like
themselves from that conversation.
Yeah, that we try to separate ourselves from that. I'm not saying we're better than anyone, but we don't, you know, we look at it critically in different ways. I don't care about it being woke or this or that or whatever. I'll give anyone a chance, but it just wasn't that great, like you said, of a final product, or the stuff that the flaws outweighed the good parts of the show. And I honestly, I would have seen a second season if they did it. I felt like it would have been maybe an improvement. I think Ahsoka, it's tough to say. You know, I don't want to say it's the Nepo child because Filoni is so high up in the company now. So I felt like there'd be a second season of Ahsoka. But again, I welcome it. I liked most of the first season. I would probably say much stronger to me than the Acolyte. But yeah, it's funny how these things happen. Also, you have all the stuff going on in Disney and streaming these days. It's such there's so much competition, and they're not getting the return from streaming that they thought, you know, at one point was possible. You know, you can only have so many subscribers, right? But when you put a movie out theatrically,
let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
Do you think if there's so many Star Wars movies they've tried to get up and running over the last few years, like Rogue Squadron was supposed to come out 2 years ago originally in 2023, right?
Yeah.
Because there's like Marvel that has the 4 movies and 4 shows essentially that come out almost every year. This year's a little different, right? What would streaming look like? Would shows like this be well received? Would Star Wars have a higher streaming audience if it had been a part of the culture a little bit more with a film or 2 that would have come out in the last 6 years? Because we haven't seen one since 2019. It's been nearly 6 years since the last Star Wars movie. Will be almost 7 whenever The Mandalorian and Grogu comes out. And the reason I ask this is because TV shows just 99% of the time don't hold any weight culturally when you're just discussing what's being watched with other people. Sure, you're going to find your little groups here or there, but I mean, we talked about Fantastic Four earlier. It's going to be in the discussion for a while. Everyone you know seems to have an opinion on Superman, or why or not they're going to go see it. Even if they don't want to go see it, they probably have a reason why they're not going to go see it. Or even the stupid fun movies like Jurassic World, right? Like these movies just have a way of impacting the culture and discussion way more and bring way more relevancy than TV does in this day and age with streaming. And I wonder do you think that if Star Wars would have been able to get a movie or 2 off the ground, we would see better streaming numbers for Star Wars? Because I think it's an interesting discussion, because Marvel's not really having a lot of success with its shows either on Disney Plus, and they pump out movies all the time. And so there's like a discussion of, is that oversaturation? And then Star Wars, it's like, well, they're a movie franchise that's not making movies. Like what is the problem, and how can we get maybe more people watching as well?
I don't think having more Star Wars movies out would improve the Disney Plus numbers unless they put out constant shows that are like critically acclaimed. I think I think the fatigue is real, to be honest with you. You know, I find myself, me and my kids would catch every Marvel thing that came out, and then it got to a point where there's just too much. And it's almost, sometimes I find that way with the books. Sorry to say that, because I know you're a big fan of the books, but like
Fine.
you feel like you fall behind and you can't catch up, or
Yeah.
and you hear a lot of word of mouth like with these things. Sometimes if it's a movie, it's like it's special because it
It's more of an
Marvel.
experience.
There was never a time when there was more than one Star Wars movie coming out. Like there are many more. So Star Wars movies always an event. We had that strange season where we had from 2015 to 2019, we had a movie every year, but that was not the way Star Wars was,
Right.
In its history.
For a long time. Right. Yeah.
It was always an event. And when I was, sound like the old man now, when I was young, there was no competition to it either. It wasn't like, okay, I'm going to see that. There'd be maybe another movie this summer, but it wasn't like 3 or 4 or 5 other movies that would be the summer blockbuster. It was like, that was like, it had the floor to itself, with the exception of a few other things maybe coming out.
Right.
But so yeah, I think, and I hate to use the word diluted, but you feel like they weren't putting out products that were really getting the response they wanted. And I basically, I like a lot of stuff. I overlook a lot of stuff. If it's Star Wars, I'll watch it, but I can't say the same for the casual person. So getting back to your original question, I don't think having more movies out would have helped the Disney Plus numbers if we were given the same shows that we were.
I agree, because in the end, Star Wars is bigger than it. To me, like you said, it's a movie franchise. It's a big event. Like when you go to a Star Wars movie, it's supposed to be it's a cultural experience. It's a spiritual experience. There's a holistic nature to going to see a Star Wars movie for some people, and then for the others, it's like, this is just pure fun. Like, this is pure cinema, right? And that doesn't translate to TV most of the time. You go and you put something on and you enjoy it and you sit back on your couch. But a lot of people nowadays are just doing other things while the TV is on. And you mentioned the word diluted. And while I'm not trying to say that Star Wars, TV is not as important as some of the Star Wars movies, but when you think about the gravity of Star Wars stories, I wish they maybe had scaled back in some of the shows and not given us as much, because I want every Star Wars project to feel really important. And this is why I'm actually happy that we have this long break before Star Wars. Like, we have Andor that just wrapped up, and then we're not going to have any live action Star Wars TV for a full year and change, because the Ahsoka season 2 is probably not coming out until next September, October time. So we're going to have a full year and change before then. Plenty of time to get ready and charged up for that. Yep. Obviously, I would not like to go another 6-7 years without a Star Wars movie after Mando and Grogu. But I also don't think having a Star Wars movie every year is the right course of action for the franchise either. So I think maybe taking this break, reevaluate. Again, Manslayer brought up animation. I'm always down for animation. Like, I think their audience on that's pretty strong. They can keep doing like animation whenever they want. But for these shows, be very picky about what shows you're putting out there, and be very selective about what you're willing to invest in, and then make sure that, for your movies, let's not oversaturate the market with Star Wars. Let's continue to make these events special, and maybe, we might see more success that way.
Yeah, I agree. Oversaturation is a better word, I think, than dilution, because when all this was announced, when we found out about Disney purchasing Lucasfilm, and they're like, a movie, we saw the release, like the schedule, that we're going to get this movie, and it's going to be every year there's going to be a Star Wars movie. We were like, sign us up. We want more. Give us more. And
more?
Yeah. And now it's like, oh, I'm full,
Yeah.
But I and it's funny to feel that way, but like, I feel like, take your time, we'll still be here, but take your time, really polish it and show us, and it's tough. It's a mixed bag,
It's tough.
You get
But
like
you
you
know,
get
it's
stuff. You
just
get
imagine the feeling you're gonna have after that long, and you're gonna be in the theaters for Mando Grogu, or it's been a few years since Ahsoka. It's been a couple years since you've put on Disney Plus for a new Star Wars show. Like it's gonna be a while, and I think it's important to build up to those events and make them feel special. Versus when you finish one, you're like, all right, got 3 weeks until the next one.
I'm really excited for Mandalorian Grogu. I hope it's really good. I think that they're gonna. It's just gonna. I feel like it's just gonna be pure fun for a
That's all
movie.
it needs
And
to be.
like you said, it really, really, there's a desire now to see a Star Wars movie. I just hope it's not. I know it's based on the show. So like I know some people that haven't really watched Mandalorian that are casual, maybe casual,
Right.
really casual fans that haven't been into it. So I hope it doesn't affect people going to see it.
I
So
think
it's
people will go see it. I think
yeah,
they're gonna market the heck out of that with Pedro
yeah,
Pascal, the Mandalorian. You're gonna have Baby Yoda doing. So did you see the marketing that they did for like Lilo and Stitch with Stitch driving around the cars and all the mayhem? Just imagine the Grogu marketing that's gonna be taking
that's true.
place starting in December with Avatar when Avatar comes out. I guarantee you they have Grogu stuff there because they'll probably drop the trailer that week for that. That week's probably going to be where they start really pumping the trailer everywhere, a new trailer, right? And then everything that comes out since it's going to be boom, 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 boom. It's going to be Marvel, or it's going to be Yoda, Baby Yoda, Baby Yoda, Baby Yoda, Grogu, Grogu, Grogu. You're going to have they'll probably have some of the people that have their Mando costumes at Disney. They're probably gonna plant those people at different theaters to welcome people. Like they're gonna go hard with that because they know they do need to maybe work a little bit to draw some of those people in. But I think that'll be enough to lure most of the casuals in for Star Wars. And the fact is, I think it's gonna, like you said, I think it's gonna be a really fun movie, and I can't wait for that. But anyway, great show tonight, Tom. It was fun talking everything with you. I'm excited for next Thursday, unless some crazy news drops or we get some random announcement or something else happens. We're going to have some more Ahsoka season 2 talk next week. But first, we're going to do a best of Anakin Skywalker discussion. We're going to talk about our favorite Anakin Skywalker moments across, the prequels, across the Clone Wars, and we can even get into, the first season of Ahsoka. Like we can talk about the different people who have portrayed Anakin and our favorite moments for each of them. We'll talk about, yes, the tragedy of Anakin Skywalker, some of those great moments that we've had for one of the great characters of all. And then we're going to speculate into what Anakin's role is going to be in Ahsoka season 2. How much will we see Hayden Christensen in the show? Will it be a little bit more than season 1, about the same, a little less? Are we going to get more flashbacks? Whispers, I think Obi-Wan's going to show up too. So like all of those things, we'll talk about that next week, unless of course something crazy happens. But anyway, a lot of fun stuff. Tom, I know you're probably pretty tired. You've been busy. You got back from your trip. You've been going at it full speed. You got the wedding coming up. I know you got let's see, you saw Fantastic Four just now. It's 11:30. Get some rest. It's good to see you. Any also, oh yeah, timeline show. Luke and I will probably record soon for episode 52. We're gonna do a couple comic runs here to wrap up phase 1 of the High Republic. Maybe we'll be able to record something else for early next week. For Light and Life, remember everyone. Oh yeah, and Tom and I, guys, we are finalizing a very fun project that we will announce very soon. We're hopefully we'll finalize that very soon, and we will announce that shortly. But very fun. Make sure you stay tuned for that. Keep your eyes open. Remember, we're all the Republic.